So I'm going to show how to use the Genisys system for Pixie booting and provisioning servers. So the best way to do that is just to kind of show you the one of the test scripts we have. So this uses a .env file to configure some VM setups, and then when we run it, it will actually launch those VMs in VirtualBox. So when we launch this, it will do a basic setup of Ubuntu. It's all pre-installed by on a disk image that's brought in, downloaded and stored. But then back in this terminal, you'll see we actually SSH into that to set up the Genisys application, and that uses one of the pre-configured configs that we've got to set up things like the interfaces and FTP and the server like that listens for clients to actually come online, and specifies like a bunch of other stuff, like whether it's Debian, which is currently the only thing we support, what kind of users. This password is just the word password hashed, some SSH keys and whatnot. All this is set up by Genisys on that client server you see up there. We could log into it to see what's going on, but really it's all done installing now. So this is one issue with the test script right now. It's supposed to have forked the server into the background, and then exited and continued running the test script down. Set up a client VirtualBox to actually boot off of. That doesn't happen because the setup script isn't forking properly. It's some weird interaction with SSH. So I'm just gonna Control C this for now. The host is still running, and we'll make a new Genisys test VM, and I like to set this to Debian. You don't have to. This is one of my beefier machines, so we'll give it some bunch of RAM and CPU to work with. We'll want to make a hard disk, and before we can launch this, of course it's Pixie booting, so we've got to set it up to run on the network, and we've got to attach it to the internal network adapter. And once that's done, we can launch this machine. And let me add it to this so you can see it. And so it's starting to Pixie boot now, and we'll see that go in just a bit. So all the Pixie booting, the TFTP, the DNS, all that was set up by Genisys over here when we SSH'd in. After it installed the Genisys Python module, it installed all of the necessary like network configurations, SSH keys, all that, and that generated all of the TFTP files and everything that are needed to do a Pixie booting. So now we just kind of get to wait as Debian installs itself. There's not much to do at this point. I guess I can show on this machine. If we log in, we can show kind of like what's been done. So var tftp. So this is all the Pixie booting files. There's a VSFTP server as well, hosting some first boot stuff. So that'll be a script that gets run when this machine is fully booted. And even this was generated by. None of this was here before I ran this, and so it's this long curl command that will let the server running on here. And the best way I can show that the server is running is just a grep on PS, and you can see the Genisys server is running. And basically what the Genisys server is doing, I don't know if I can do this right. Yeah, I don't have netstat installed on here, but it's listening on that 15206 port for this client to finish booting. And when it's done, this client will send a hello, and it should write that to a var Genisys inventory.json, which I believe root currently owns. So let me sudo that. Never mind. Still working through some of the kinks here. I'll need to check kind of the setup script that I'm working on. It's still very much a work in progress. So while we're waiting, I can kind of pull up and show. This is the setup script that would have been ran. Well, this is the setup script that was ran over SSH to actually set this up. So the test script puts all the test information in the /app folder. I stole that from some Docker images I'm used to using. And then we add a Genisys user to run the server with. We install the Python package, and that's why I didn't see it earlier. It's actually called hosts.json, not inventory.json. Yeah, should just be empty file right now, but once this client boots, the plan is for this file to get populated with information about those clients. We are working towards moving that to a Mongo database rather than just a flat JSON file, but that's still a work in progress. But anyways, back to this. So yeah, after we install the Python module, we have the Genisys command available. So that installs the config file that I can pull back up here real quick. It bases it on this config file, and then it does have to touch the host file because currently there's a issue where the Genisys server will throw an error if the hosts file doesn't already exist, and then we just we give it ownership by the server user. You can see we do, for privilege escalation reasons, we allow to specify the server user that gets ran as. And this is where it's supposed to fork the server process off and disown it from the terminal. For some reason, even though it's forked and disowned, SSH doesn't recognize. I guess it's a child process of SSH or something. So the SSH won't actually exit, and that's what's preventing our test.sh from actually finishing up. I've ran a couple different tests, and I have not figured out a good way to force SSH to do that without it not waiting for all this stuff to run, which, being the pip install especially, can take some amount of time. We do need to wait for that before launching the second VirtualBox machine, because otherwise it's gonna launch this, and it's not gonna be ready to accept and actually do the Pixie booting. So I think that's all I really have to talk about at this point in time. This Debian install is going to take a little longer to finish, so I'll just go ahead and cut here and get back at you once something interesting is happening. So here's something interesting. The Debian installer actually has this bug sometimes where it'll wrap the border with these Unicode characters instead of the normal border. I've actually submitted a bug to the Debian mailing lists about this, and we're working on figuring out an exact reproduction, because I get it consistently, but the maintainer is so far unable to reproduce it. I'm afraid it actually is something to do with Genisys, but narrowing down exactly what has been difficult. like one of the things we thought it was something to do with the VGA mode, but I added recently the VGA mode to the command line to specify a known working VGA mode, and that didn't fix the issue. So kind of back to the drawing board on that. I also looked into various things like how the Pixie Linux config actually gets symlinked into the TFTP directory, but that was a dead end as well. So we're still looking into that, and hopefully we can find something relatively soon. Alright, so we're actually booting into Debian now. You'll see my VirtualBox is kind of jumping all over the place, and we now have a fully installed Debian login, and we can log in as the user. We didn't get an error when we were doing this, so we can see some of the first boot stuff was copied over. We're still bug fixing this, so the Genisys first boot service is not properly installed yet, so if we hop back over to the other virtual machine, we aren't going to see that in there yet, but what I should be able to do is sudo /inch first boot entry point sudo.found. I forgot sudo is not actually installed by default on Debian. That's a fun one. So you actually have to, sorry, that's not the syntax for su. There we go. And we made the root password the same thing. And that's right, we have to install curl. This is all good. This is actually the furthest we've gotten here, so this is actually really good data for me, so I'm gonna make note of this. This is actually should be we're recording this, so I'm gonna make note of this, and I'm just gonna get back to work on it. So thanks for watching, and I'll give another update soon.